like seeing him deposed, but, you know, they certainly went after me a lot more than that.
We are now asking and demanding that President Trump officially come in and testify in front of the Oversight Committee.
This is Today As It Happened. Good Friday evening to you. I'm Stephanie Liebergen here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories of the day. From a military buildup in Israel as tensions rise between the U.S. and Iran, to investigators nearing the 1-month mark since the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. But first, this morning, our international correspondent in Islamabad gave us a look at the open conflict between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Pakistan and Afghanistan are now in what Pakistan's defense minister calls open war. The dramatic escalation began late Thursday when Afghanistan launched a cross-border attack on Pakistan. Now, Afghanistan said it was just retaliating for earlier Pakistani airstrikes. Scripps News international correspondent Hira Mustafa is on the ground in Islamabad for us today. So, Hira, is there a specific incident that sparked this week's confrontations?
Well, yes, this latest escalation of violence comes after Afghanistan's spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid announced on Thursday that it has launched a massive military operation against Pakistan. And after that, we saw that Pakistan's information ministry put out a statement on social media platform X stating that in response to the Afghanistan's military operation, Pakistan has also launched a large-scale operation in which they are targeting the ammunition depots, military installations inside Afghanistan. They also allege that they have targeted Afghanistan's provinces of Kandahar, Nangarhar, Paktika, and also they struck the military installations in Kabul. As we speak now, the military operation is still ongoing. There are reports that the fighting is continuing on different locations at the Pakistan-Afghanistan border. Earlier, also, we saw a statement coming out from the Pakistan's military spokesperson in which he stated that Pakistan is continuing this operation against Afghanistan on the instructions of the country's prime minister because of the ongoing security operation against Afghanistan. Security across the country is on high alert. Aerial surveillance is also intensified along the western border. Experts who we are speaking to in the capital are telling us that this is a very tense situation and regional countries need to play their part in de-escalating the tensions between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Though we have seen a statement coming in from the Afghan Taliban spokesperson that they are interested to have a dialogue with Pakistan in order to resolve this conflict.
Well, what are the chances of some kind of peaceful solution between the two countries if what's happening right now is being called open war?
Well, absolutely. The country's defense minister stated on social media platform that Pakistan has run out of patience with Afghanistan and declared that it's an open war with Afghanistan now. Pakistan's position on this matter is very clear. We have seen statements coming in from the country's prime minister, president, information minister, and other federal ministers, all reiterating that Pakistan will only agree for a ceasefire with Afghanistan if Afghan administration guarantees and promises that it will take action against the militant groups who are carrying out cross-border attacks in Pakistan. Pakistan alleges that ever since U.S. troops has withdrawn in 2020 from Kabul, there is an uptick in terrorist attacks in Pakistan, especially in the provinces of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan. Islamabad says if Afghanistan is not going to dismantle the terror groups like Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and ISIS, which Pakistan blames is operating from Afghanistan and was also behind a suicide bombing blast that happened earlier this month, hitting Shia mosque that killed more than 30 people, is operating from Afghanistan. If Afghanistan agrees that it will take action against those groups, only then Pakistan will agree for a ceasefire. We have seen Iran's foreign minister reaching out to Islamabad, saying that Iran can play a role in de-escalating the tensions between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Similarly, we have seen Russian Foreign Minister China also expressing grave concern on the escalation between the two countries. And all the regional countries are now urging both the warring sides to de-escalate the tensions through the table of diplomacy.
Certainly hopes that some diplomacy can help reduce that tension there. Scripps News international correspondent Hira Mustafa, thank you so much for keeping us updated on that today. And now let's look at some of our other top headlines of the day. We are getting some concerning news about inflation today. Wholesale prices jumped much more than expected last month. The government said these prices, which are what businesses pay before costs get passed on to us as consumers, those prices rose 0.5% in January. That is much higher than the 0.3% that economists were predicting. Now, the culprit? Retailers and wholesalers are charging higher profit margins. Now, this all matters because wholesale prices often give us a preview of where our consumer prices are heading next. Scouting America will change several policies to keep Pentagon support, including one targeting transgender youth. The organization will drop its Citizenship in Society merit badge and create a military service badge instead. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced the deal Friday as part of his campaign against military diversity programs. Hegseth says the Pentagon will review the changes in 6 months, and it could end support of Scouting America if they don't comply. The military and the Scouts have long had ties, including support for the National Jamboree since 1937. The U.S. military accidentally shot down one of its own drones in Texas using a controversial anti-drone laser system. Congressional representatives confirmed the Customs and Border Protection drone was destroyed, though the timing remains a bit unclear. The FAA imposed flight restrictions over Fort Hancock, Texas, for safety reasons Thursday evening. This situation follows another incident 2 weeks ago when confusion between government agencies forced the FAA to shut down El Paso's airspace for a few hours. Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois is calling for an investigation into what she calls dysfunction that's endangering aviation safety. And the USS Gerald R. Ford, the largest aircraft carrier in the world, is now off the coast of Israel, marking one of the most prominent U.S. naval presences in recent history. Positioned alongside other American forces in the region, the Ford is the largest U.S. military buildup there since the 2003 Iraq War. At the same time, the U.S. Embassy in Israel is evacuating non-essential personnel, a move that underscores growing concern in Washington and the very real risks on the ground. Scripps News senior international correspondent Jason Bellini is in Tel Aviv, where he reports that as part of this buildup of U.S. forces, they are deploying a historic first.
Here in Israel, we're seeing an unmistakable signal from what is considered the most advanced fighter jet in the world.
It was plane spotters, aviation enthusiasts who first broke the news. American F-22 fighter jets lifting off one after the other from a UK airbase in what would turn out to be a consequential move. America's most dominant fighter jet would soon touch down deep in the Israeli desert at a remote airbase within operational range of Iran and its proxies, such as Yemen's Houthis. The F-22 Raptor is designed to slip past radar, dominate enemy aircraft, and clear the skies before other forces move in. Its mission is always clear: gain control of contested airspace before an adversary can respond. From southern Israel, the aircraft now sit within reach of Iranian air defense networks and possible infrastructure. They also are positioned to respond to aerial threats facing Israel from multiple fronts, including the Houthis in Yemen, who've attacked Israel before.
We're learning tonight that there is yet another squadron of those F-22 fighter jets now at that airbase in the UK, staged for deployment potentially here in Israel. Jason Bellini, Scripps News Group, Tel Aviv.
Coming up on Today As It Happened.
The search for Nancy Guthrie has lasted nearly a month. I'm Lori Jangliha. The latest on the investigation ahead.
You're watching Today As It Happened, Scripps News rundown of the biggest events and stories of the day. So let's jump right back in. New analysis shows ICE officers receive far less training than most federal agents with a gun and a badge. ICE deportation officers now receive 42 days of training. That's less than half of what they got during the Biden administration. It's also less training than odometer fraud investigators. Now, some experts with inside knowledge say that reduction could lead to deadly mistakes, but ICE defends their training, saying no essential content is left out and that training days now run 12 hours long instead of 8. Target will stop selling its entire assortment of cereal with certified synthetic colors by the end of May. The move was announced today. Target said it had been phasing out synthetic colors in cereals for several years. Currently, nearly 85% of its cereal sales already come from products made without certified synthetic dyes. Nearly a month has passed since the disappearance of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie. The Today Show host's mother went missing early last month. With more than $1 million being offered for tips leading to her recovery, are investigators any close to finding her? Scripps News senior national investigative correspondent Lori Jane Gliha is joining me now live. So, Lori Jane, what is the latest on this investigation?
Well, Stephanie, despite the incredible recovery of photos and videos from Nancy Guthrie's front door Nest camera a few weeks ago, all the leads we've seen play out publicly have not brought Nancy home. Still, there has been a flurry of activity at her house in recent days, giving many people continued hope. Multiple law enforcement vehicles and officials returned to Nancy Guthrie's house this week as her daughter, Today Show host Savannah Guthrie, made another plea on social media.
We still believe. We still believe in a miracle. We still believe that she can come home.
Savannah, conceding that her mother may have passed away, offered up to $1 million for help getting answers.
We need to know where she is. We need her to come home. We also know that she may be lost. She may already be gone.
Investigators reported a surge in tips following the Guthrie family's reward offer. Meanwhile, they continue to follow leads and collect possible evidence. They're hoping somebody comes forward if they know the person behind this mask, brazenly standing at Nancy Guthrie's front door, tampering with her Nest camera just before she disappeared. And just moments ago, Stephanie, Savannah Guthrie did post a clip on her Instagram page from the Today Show, walking people through how they can remain anonymous if they provide a helpful tip and how they can possibly receive a cash reward if it leads to the recovery of Nancy Guthrie. And one other thing, Stephanie, I wanted to mention, Scripps News also checked with the courts again to see if we could get some additional insight on the search warrants that have been carried out and the tips that prompted law enforcement to detain some individuals initially. But those court records, as of now, are still sealed. Stephanie.
Well, Lori Jane, your story mentioned a surge in tips. Have there been any tips of note coming into the FBI?
Well, the Pima County Sheriff's Department says that people are submitting footage and they are aware of at least one video from a residence that was, quote, a bit further from the Guthrie home that appears to show some vehicles driving by around a similar time to when Nancy went missing. But they are still requesting that people submit video evidence if they believe they have something that might help, Stephanie.
Well, I also know there have been some DNA samples that have been collected and tested. What is the latest on those?
Well, the most recent information that they released indicates that they submitted everything for forensic analysis at this time, and the laboratory is still processing the evidence, but they do not have additional updates to provide on that, Stephanie.
Scripps News senior national investigative correspondent Lori Jane Gliha, thank you so much for keeping us updated on this story that has really captivated the country. Up next on Today As It Happened.
He appears in the Epstein files next to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, almost more than anybody else. So it's time for the president to answer questions about why files are missing from the DOJ.
You're watching Scripps News.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. Let's check back in on our daily briefing of today's top stories.
Now the latest on the Bill Clinton deposition taking place right now in Chappaqua, New York. No president, past or in office, has ever sat for a deposition with members of Congress. That is, until today. Right now, the former president, Bill Clinton, is being deposed behind closed doors, answering questions before a House committee. Now, that committee has been investigating both Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. His testimony coming one day after his wife, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, spent hours before the committee. Her testimony, in a nutshell, she says she didn't know Epstein. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller is live in New York now with the latest. Alex, what has happened now in the last hour?
Well, lawmakers are back inside continuing these questions now after just a brief 10-minute break. We heard from them during the break. Democrats still pushing this idea that they want to see the sitting president. But we do know that Clinton has been cooperative. We heard from Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, a Republican, saying that he has been cooperative. Democrats saying that he has not taken the fifth at all and has answered every single question. But there's a little bit of a discrepancy right now about what the rules are here, because typically these closed-door depositions, you can't just exactly say what questions you've been asking the person answering the questions. But we have seen from Chairman Comer that he has disclosed what they've been talking about. He said that Clinton was asked directly if he thinks President Trump should testify before the committee, to which Clinton responded that that was a choice of theirs. But he also said that Clinton said he'd never heard anything from Trump himself about knowing about Epstein's criminal activity. Now, Congresswoman Luna said that she also wants to bring 4 women in for questioning that she says were involved in trafficking operations, and that she doesn't want to bring in anybody who have leveled what she calls unsubstantiated claims against Clinton. But we know now that what the former president said. I want to read you a little bit of his opening statement. He said that he is not involved in all of this. I know what I saw, and more importantly, what I didn't see. I know what I did, and more importantly, what I didn't do. I saw nothing, and I did nothing wrong. And he said, you know, that there will be times today that he's going to say that he doesn't recall, and while that might be unsatisfying, that that is the truth.
Alex, how will Bill Clinton's line of questioning differ from that of his wife, Hillary Clinton?
Well, look, Secretary Clinton has said that she never met Jeffrey Epstein. We have not seen photos of him the same way that we saw the photos that you just saw on your screen. We know that Jeffrey Epstein traveled with the former president in the years after his presidency. Now, Clinton says that he stopped speaking to Jeffrey Epstein well before he was convicted in 2008. But that doesn't stop Republicans and Democrats alike from having questions. Listen to what the chairman had to say.
There are a lot of photos that have been released by the Department of Justice as well as the Epstein estate. There are a lot of email correspondence that included President Clinton. We know President Clinton had, and Secretary Clinton confirmed this yesterday, Jeffrey Epstein was in the White House 17 times while Bill Clinton was president. We know that Bill Clinton flew on Jeffrey Epstein's plane at least 27 times. So those are questions that we're going to ask.
And as you saw from those photos, he traveled all over the world with Epstein. But again, Clinton says that he did not know about this criminal activity. But when you look at not only Clinton's interactions with Epstein, there are also questions likely being leveled right now about Clinton's interactions with other people who have been named in these files, including the former Prince Andrew. When I was going through these files, there are nearly 4,000 of them that bear the name Clinton when you search it. There's this email popped up for me where Ghislaine Maxwell was asking somebody whose name is redacted, but it does say WJC there, what Andrew's address is for a dinner with Clinton. Obviously, then you see that address is Givendell.
You know, and I think that one of the things that both sides seem to forget is that the public has a vote in this, and they see the photographs, and they will decide whether they think that this was appropriate conduct for a man who was a sitting president. Democrats, by the way, appear to have a renewed focus on whether a sitting president should be called. What are they saying?
Yeah, we spoke about this yesterday, about Pandora's box being opened, and you can see the messaging really being honed by the Democrats at every single time they come to the mic. They want to see President Trump sit before them. Obviously, a little bit more difficult to get a sitting president rather than a former president, but this is something that they are really focused on. Listen to what the top Democrat on the committee said earlier today.
Republicans have now set a new precedent, which is to bring in presidents and former presidents to testify. So we're once again going to make that call that we did yesterday. We are now asking and demanding that President Trump officially come in and testify in front of the Oversight Committee. He appears in the Epstein files next to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell almost more than anybody else.
In those files, they say are interviews with somebody who has accused the sitting president of sexual assault when she was a minor. So they've got questions about where those files are as well.
We also know that there was that back and forth between Nancy Mace and Hillary Clinton. Depending on who you talk to, it was either a shouting match or something less than that. Last week, we saw Les Wexner's deposition tape put out just hours after his testimony wrapped up. Where is that tape from yesterday?
We are still waiting for it to be made public. Look, the way this works is Republicans control the committee, which means that they control the video camera and the transcript. So they ultimately have the say of what gets disclosed. Now, as you mentioned with Les Wexner, we saw that in a matter of hours. We still have not seen Hillary Clinton's testimony. And so, of course, they have to go through this to make sure that survivor names are being protected, to make sure that there's not anything that is nefarious that could be put out for the public to see. But otherwise, Democrats and Republicans have called for these transcripts and the videos to come out. As you mentioned, Congresswoman Nancy Mace saying that Clinton yelled at her. Democrats are disputing this, and so Mace is saying, you know, roll the tapes, and it's in the hands of her own party.
Hillary Clinton saying roll the tape as well. Nancy Mace saying Hillary Clinton was unhinged. Scripps News senior national correspondent Alex Miller live for us in New York.
Coming up on Today As It Happened.
I'm not happy with the fact that they're not willing to give us what we have to have. So I'm not thrilled with that. We'll see what happens. We're talking later.
Glad you're back with us on Today As It Happened. I'm Stephanie Liebergen here with your daily rundown of today's top stories.
We continue to follow the developing news coming out of Minnesota. 30 more people have been indicted for allegedly taking part in that ICE protest inside a Minnesota church. That brings the total now to 39, including journalist Don Lemon. Now, this move is keeping with Attorney General Pam Bondi's promise, saying you cannot attack a house of worship. She says if you do, we will prosecute you. Scripps News legal affairs correspondent Avajoy Burnett is in our D.C. newsroom. And Avajoy, tell us more about the 30 additional people who have been indicted.
Del, the number of people who are now on the superseding indictment, it has quadrupled. But beyond the notable names we've spoken about so far, for example, Don Lemon and another journalist whose name is Georgia Fort, and also a civil rights leader in the state of Minnesota, we aren't seeing any other names on this list who are people of national notoriety. As you mentioned, Attorney General Pam Bondi, she mentioned this on social media just this afternoon, announcing that 25 people have been arrested, and she said more arrests will be coming this afternoon in the day. She said these arrests were made at her direction, but what we do know with this particular story here is that these people have been accused of entering this church in Minnesota back in January, and they're accused of intimidating the churchgoers there. Many of the folks who walked into that church, they said they were protesting a leader in that church who is also an ICE official. And remember, the backstory here is that there were protests that were ongoing in the state of Minnesota as about 3,000 ICE agents descended on the state for immigration and customs enforcement operations. And all of this was also happening after 2 residents in that state died after having encounters with ICE agents in 2 separate incidents. We're talking about Renee Good and Alex Preddy. What we also know is that many of these people have proclaimed their innocence. Don Lemon, for example, and Georgia Fort, they said that there were journalists who were exercising their constitutional rights of going into this church and covering what was going on. We do know, as you see the images there, Don Lemon has actually gone into court. He went into court a few weeks ago, and he entered a plea of not guilty in this particular case. So this is a story, Del, that continues to develop as we now know that an additional 30 people have been added to that indictment out of the state of Minnesota.
So, Avajoy, what's next?
What's next now is what the Attorney General mentioned. She said that additional people will be arrested, but the next steps after that is actually getting all of these people into court. We saw Don Lemon entering court not too long ago, just a few weeks ago, but in that particular instance, all the 9 people who were on this original indictment, they did not enter court for their initial appearance where they would enter a plea of guilty or not guilty at the same time. And now that we have 30 additional people, possibly, there's a possibility that all of these folks will be entering the courthouse there, the federal courthouse, at different times to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. Don Lemon, he has entered a plea of not guilty when he went into court not too long ago. Georgia Fort, that other journalist who is very well known in the state and gained notoriety because she streamed the moment when officials showed up at her door to arrest her. She also entered a plea of not guilty. And Akima Levy-Armstrong, civil rights attorney there and the president of the NAACP chapter, also pleaded not guilty. So that's what we will be seeing in the coming weeks, is possibly a parade of additional folks who've been indicted on the superseding indictment, entering a courthouse and entering a plea of guilty or not guilty, Del.
Scripps News legal affairs correspondent Avajoy Burnett, live for us in D.C. Avajoy, thank you very much. Let's go now to the White House. Our senior White House correspondent Haley Bull is live on the North Lawn. And Haley, what is the latest now on that urgent news from the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, telling people basically they're on the ground, get out? What do we know about the situation with Iran at this hour?
Well, Del, what we know is President Trump is continuing to weigh his options with Iran, but appearing to share frustration with negotiations as pressure continues to build in the region. The president is saying this afternoon that he has not made up his mind, but he is not happy with the way the Iranians are negotiating. It is a markedly different tone from the officials from Oman who hosted those indirect talks between U.S. and Iranian officials. Today, the Omanis briefing other nations in the region on what they called positive outcomes. Their foreign minister also meeting with Vice President J.D. Vance today. The foreign minister stating, quote, "Peace is within our reach. noting that they reviewed efforts to reach a nuclear agreement and, quote, ensuring the peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear energy program. Meanwhile, we have seen those diplomatic channels pressed across the region. Iran's foreign minister, in a readout from their foreign ministry in a call with the Egyptians, said that successful diplomacy, quote, requires seriousness and realism from the other side, as well as avoiding any miscalculation and excessive demand. So while we are seeing on one hand a push for an optimistic tone, the comments coming from officials in the U.S. and in Iran is certainly taking a more direct approach. Now, when we get down to the details of this, the U.S. is continuing to call for no nuclear weapons for Iran, while the Iranians have not publicly indicated a willingness to walk away from enrichment entirely, Del. And keep in mind, just ahead of these talks, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Iran was not enriching, but suggested that they were trying to get to a place where they could. Of course, as Jason just detailed, in the backdrop, we have seen military pressure build up in the region with U.S. assets. President Trump, briefed by the head of Central Command just yesterday, according to a source familiar. What is not clear at this point to those closely watching the situation is what the ultimate goal of any potential military action would be and what level of action the president would move on. He was pressed today, though, on the consequences of a potential drawn-out conflict, saying this.
I guess you could say there's always a risk. You know, when there's war, there's a risk in anything, both good and bad. We've had tremendous luck with myself, Soleimani, al-Baghdadi. Everything's worked out, and then we do the Midnight Hammer and so many others. Everything's worked out, and we want to keep it that way. But we're going to see. Look, it'd be wonderful if they'd negotiate really in good conscience, good faith and conscience, but they are not getting there.
Meanwhile, Del, as the embassy there in Israel is allowing non-emergency government personnel to leave, Secretary of State Marco Rubio is still expected to visit Israel next week to discuss, in part, Iran as well.
Yeah, Haley, I want to switch gears. Are we learning anything new about those Americans who were shot and killed racing toward Cuba?
We are continuing to closely follow the developments on that front. The president today doubling down on his view that Cuba is what he called a nation in deep trouble, suggesting that Cuba wants their help. Today, he said that they are in contact with the Cuban authorities, but also suggesting what he called a, quote, friendly takeover of Cuba. Listen.
Scripps News senior White House correspondent Haley Beauforest live on the North Lawn. Haley, we thank you very much.
We'll be right back with more of today's top stories on Today As It Happened.
You're watching Scripps News.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. I'm Stephanie Liebergan. Let's jump right back into our rundown of the top stories of the day.
President hitting the road at this hour, heading to Texas to tout his economic speech after the State of the Union. It was unveiled Tuesday here in Washington, but did that address give him a post-speech bump in the polls? Got a lot of applause from Republicans that night inside the chambers, but as they say, how's it playing in Peoria? Scripps News political director Andrew Rafferty joins us now with the latest polls. And Raff, does the president have any increased momentum coming out of the State of the Union?
Well, a lot of applause and a lot of opportunities for applause because it was the longest speech in history. We'll start with the good news, perhaps, Del, here on a Friday afternoon. We'll start with some optimism. So if you're part of the White House right now watching this, here is the sort of takeaway that you can hang your hat on, is that most Americans felt, by and large, that they had a positive impression of the president during his speech. This is a poll that we did with our partners at Talker Research, and it is a poll of people who watched the State of the Union. So the caveat here is that most people who watch a State of the Union are, in fact, a member of the same party as the president delivering it. And so this example, it did skew a little bit more towards Republicans. And you see that by and large, folks thought that the president spent a lot of time on the priorities that they care most about, which from our previous polling, we know it is by and far the economy, to a lesser extent, immigration, healthcare, but it was really about affordability. And you heard the president try at least to start that speech on that. So confidence in his plans on affordability, well, here's the other end of the spectrum. 48%, that's less than a majority, of course, say that they have more confidence. You add up those other two, and you get a higher percentage, 52%, say their opinion either didn't change or they have less confidence in the president's plans when it comes to affordability. And then, of course, the other big focus of the night were tariffs. This is coming just a few days after that Supreme Court ruling. And this is pretty striking, again, because more Republicans are polled in this, because this is people who watched the speech, but 50% say these tariffs are hurting Americans. Also, not a whole lot of confidence in the president's trade and tariffs agenda going forward. So if he was trying to go in to sort of explain to Americans the benefits of those policies that we know are now at 10%, that I'm sure going to lead to more court cases, well, he did not do that. So it'll be interesting to see him sort of try to take whatever sort of momentum he has. But what we have seen time and time again from this president is that his message plays really strong for Republicans, and that's what we saw in those numbers. It just does not resonate outside of his Republican base when you're talking about Democrats and you're talking about independents.
We continue to see to Wall Street, the markets giveth and the markets taketh away. They've been talking about Dow 50. It's not Dow 50,000 anymore, but right now he's in Texas. Big primary there. I think it is on Tuesday. What are you watching?
Well, look, despite his problems with some of those other groups that are outside of his political base, he still remains so incredibly popular among that MAGA conservative base. And that's why this speech here that I think we're going to dip into when he takes the stage here, if he is on time today, in Corpus Christi is so interesting because it's not a political speech, but of course, being in that state ahead of that primary on Tuesday. It just so happens to be one of the earliest primaries, also one of the most interesting on both sides of the aisle, but the focus today being on Republicans because you have John Cornyn, a longtime Republican senator who has been here in Washington representing the state of Texas for a while in Congress. He really is in jeopardy of losing that primary against Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of the Lone Star State. There's also another Republican, Wesley Hunt, and all of them are trying to sort of portray themselves as the Trump-backed candidate, though the president has been very clear that he is not endorsing any of them, though John Cornyn apparently was on the flight to Texas this afternoon.
Surprising that there is a sitting senator from your party that you're not backing. So.
Right. And then the leadership in D.C. tried to get the president to back Cornyn because they feel like he has a much better shot at winning against the Democrat, whereas Ken Paxton has a lot of potential baggage that could come up.
Before I let you go, are they worried about both Democrats? Because Tallarico is doing well. They believe he would do well against either Paxton or Cornyn. Yeah. But Jasmine Crockett is outpolling Tallarico.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, the polls have been all over the place, but both of those Democratic candidates are arguing that they are the more electable of the two, that they have the better chance And that's what we in the media always talk about, Texas potentially going blue. It hasn't happened in a few decades. Del, I think you've seen this one before.
I've seen this play before.
Yeah.
I'll believe it when I see it. Yeah. Scripps News political director Andrew Rafferty. Rafferty's always thanks.
This is Today As It Happened. We'll be right back.
Ranking Member Garcia asked President Clinton, quote, should President Trump be called to answer questions from this committee? And President Clinton said, that's for you to decide. And the president went on to say that the president, Trump, has never said anything to me to make me think he was involved.
President Clinton did bring up some additional information about some discussions with President Trump. I think that the way Chairman Comer described it, I don't think is a complete accurate description of what actually was said. So let's release the full transcript.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened, Scripps News debrief of our top stories of the day. So let's jump right back in.
Taking a look at Wall Street today, the big board closing, as you can see, in the red, down 521 points in the red all day long. At one point, down more than 700 points. A United Nations watchdog report revealing it cannot verify what's really going on with Iran's nuclear plants. The IAEA saying Tehran blocked inspectors from getting into those sites last summer. You may recall the president said the sites were obliterated. So right now, inspectors are tracking what's going on from space, and that's a major problem, since Special Envoy Steve Witkoff warned earlier that Iran is now a week away from getting a nuke. Meanwhile, is the U.S. on the brink of military action in Iran? Experts say diplomacy and military action are both on the table. The largest U.S. armada in history, though, is now stationed off the Iranian coast. And today, the U.S. ambassador to Israel telling embassy workers to leave if they want to get out, and to do it today in all caps. Scripps News senior international correspondent Jason Bellini is live on the ground for us in Tel Aviv. And Jason, it's Friday night in Tel Aviv, and I'm curious, what are the streets like?
Del, it's quiet, but that's to be expected. It's late here. It's after midnight at this point, and so people have gone to bed, but they will not be surprised if we hear air raid sirens tonight, because we're now in the window for when attacks could begin. And there are several signals that people have been reading to suggest this possibility is more than a possibility, that it's getting stronger. Doesn't mean that it will happen, but let's take into account several things. One, what you mentioned, the ambassador to Israel, he told staff that the staff that is allowed to leave, the non-essential staff, get out today. Do it today. What's that based upon? We don't have any further information on that. But once that was heard around the city, certainly people were like, okay, so this could mean something. Then you have Marco Rubio, who is supposed to be coming here tomorrow. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, his trip postponed till next week sometime, right? We also are seeing Israel get itself ready in case there is a U.S. attack on Iran. And for example, nurses, doctors that are being readied for emergency procedures when there is an attack on Israel, because that is what they would certainly expect Iran to do. If Iran is attacked, it will respond by attacking Israel. Del.
Jason, after 2 years of war with Hamas, are people in Israel war weary, and how are they reacting to that news about the embassy today, the diplomat telling workers to get out today? Today spelled in all caps.
The reaction I hear from people is, we're used to this. So weariness, maybe that's the word. Maybe it's also that people have just been through this so many times that it's become routine. That's something I see in Ukraine. The exceptional, the absurd eventually becomes normalized. And over the last few years, having event after event where they're under a security threat, when there are air raid alerts where the people are going down into bunkers, they're used to that. And so they're prepared. This could be another one of those. But there's also the concern that this time could be different, because you've got the regime in Iran that is under potential threat of being removed. They've survived the protests. The Ayatollah survived the protests and reportedly killed thousands of those protesters. If the United States decides that regime change is what it demands, then you've got a regime that has nothing left to lose and lots of ballistic missiles down.
Jason, also, this historic new weapon the U.S. is deploying in the Middle East. What do you know about that?
A new drone that is modeled, get this, on one that Iran first developed. And we're very familiar with this drone because Iran sold it to the Russians, and the Russians, they're manufacturing as well with Iran's help, this Iranian model called the Shahed, right? Well, the Americans, they got a hold of one, they tore it apart, looked at the wiring, looked at the intelligence inside of it, and they used that. Some would say the way China sometimes does with weapons and with other technologies, basically reverse engineered it, able to very quickly produce a very cheap version of this drone. And we know that it is in theater, and we learned a few other things about it. American autonomy, GPS-denied navigation, swarm capability, mass production in Arizona, $35,000 a copy. Its development led by U.S. Special Operations Command. Task Force Scorpion is now operational. America's first kamikaze drone squadron based in the Mideast, flying Iran's own invention back at its creator. The weapon is called Lucas, low-cost, unmanned combat attack system. The new one-way attack drone successfully test-launched in December. Late last year in the American Sea off the deck of the USS Santa Barbara, one of the Navy's fastest surfaced warships, designed for high-speed operations in contested coastal waters. That warship home ports in San Diego, but now here in the Mideast as part of an American show of force. Here's why that matters. It's a stark equation of modern warfare. Multi-million-dollar precision missiles launched from fighter jets and warships versus a one-way attack drone that costs a fraction of the price. Tomahawks cost $2 million each. Lucas is the answer to that math, a $35,000 drone. And one thing we know from Ukraine is that the U.S. doesn't have a limitless supply of Tomahawk missiles. There was reluctance on the part of President Trump to provide Tomahawks to Ukraine for, among other reasons, or the reason that he gave was that, well, the arsenal of them is limited and the U.S. needs them. Del?
Scripps News International correspondent Jason Bellini live for us on the ground in Tel Aviv. Jason, thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us on Today's It Happened. I'm Stephanie Liebergen. Have a great Friday night and a spectacular weekend.
They want to get him out of there. He is such a pain in the ass, but he's so good and so talented. Ted Cruz.